I'm very, very honoured to have with me Annie Duke. Annie, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, when you won the Omaha High-Low in 2004, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that the women's event was going on at the same time. Do you ever get weary of the distinctions that are continually being made between men and women in poker?
I don't get weary of the distinctions that are made between men and women in terms of people saying, oh, great female player or great male player, because I think that that's sort of a natural distinction that people make. But I've always been very strong on the issue that I don't think that women's event should be a bracelet event. I think that, on the one hand, having women's events is very useful in terms of, the fact is that whether it should be this way or not, women are intimidated by walking into a room full of men and sitting down at a poker table. And I understand that, and I understand that that's just sort of the way it is. So having women's only events is a great way for women to come in and learn a great enjoyment of this game in an environment that they might find less intimidating. But when you start elevating it to a bracelet event, that's where sort of the feminist in me comes out. Because for me, one of the unique and wonderful things about poker is that there aren't any differences between men and women when it comes to poker, because this is a game that uses your mind. And, while men's bodies might be 20% bigger and stronger, their brains aren't. So, here's one of the only places where you can be in a truly competitive environment where it doesn't matter that one person's a man and one person's a woman, or one person's 50 and one person's 25. And women have won open events. There's 9 of us who have done it. And the fact is that what that says to me is when they're like, oh, go play in the women's event to win your bracelet, it's like there's sort of a parenthetical because we know you can't win one here. And I always say to people, well, if they had a men's only event, people would be up in arms. If they had a blacks only event, people would be up in arms. And I just think that there's definitely a place for I think that having a World Series event that's a women's event is great if it's a non-bracelet event. I'd rather win my championship event when I get to compete against everybody in the world. It's supposed to be a world champion, and I feel like I can compete against the men, and I feel like any woman who puts her mind to it can compete against the men. Yeah.
No, I agree entirely. It's the effects of positive discrimination, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, just now, for example, you were signing away, and that lady, what was it she asked you to write in the book?
Oh my God, I felt really bad. Apparently, I think it was her boyfriend or her husband was playing poker and he was losing a lot of money, and so she made him quit. And so she wanted me to write in there for his birthday, don't worry about it, you weren't any good anyway, or something, which I was like, that's really mean.
It's obviously got a bit of a thing for you.
Something, I don't know. I was like, I don't want to write that. I usually write play good,
So, you're obviously quite a poker celebrity now. What would you say are the pros and cons of that? What do you find?
I think that it is what you make of it. I don't really see a lot of cons to that. It depends on what your view of things are. I suppose there would be people who are like, oh, people come up and bother me or whatever, but I don't consider it bothering. I love talking to everybody who comes up. It's like, I've been signing over in the Ultimate Bet booth, and they're like, you spend 5 minutes with everybody, because I think it's really cool that I get the opportunity to meet all these people and find out what their stories are, and that they even care who I am. It's like, that's just really cool. I lived in a time, and played poker in a time when it wasn't just that people didn't know who I was or care who I was. People looked at you like you were like a crack dealer when you told them what you did. So like, you might as well have been dealing drugs to elementary school students. So like, you're a gambler for a living, So I feel like I went from people looking totally askance at what I do and being really kind of marginalized to people thinking that what I do is like the most kick-ass thing on earth.
Like a rock star.
Which I've always thought it was, but so it's actually really fun for me. So I don't really, to tell you the truth, I don't think there is any downside. It's like, I think it is what you make of it, and it's what your attitude about it is, and it's whether you sort of embrace everything in sort of a positive light and see everything as like a new opportunity for you. And I feel like so lucky that I have the opportunities that I do because I happen to be good at my job, and I had the parlay of someone caring about my job. It's pretty cool. Not a lot of people have that opportunity.
You always seem to be doing lots of promo things. I noticed one of your promo videos, you're in the gym. Have you done a fitness video or something?
I have. I don't know if anybody wants to see me do a fitness video, but...
Yeah, we do.
But I work out a lot. I try to spin every day. The biking. I try to spin every day. I do Pilates with a trainer. I have a reformer in my house, so when I'm not training with my trainer, I can do Pilates in my house. And then I live right near this really beautiful canyon in LA, and so I usually do that 2 to 4 times a week, where I hike up and sort of take an hour hiking and whatever. I just feel like physical fitness is really important. I think it's important to being mentally fit. So, like going into the World Series in particular, I think it's a huge advantage to be physically fit.
In your breaks? Well, probably not just
No,
break,
unfortunately, the problem is that during the World Series, it's like I work out really hard before the World Series, because if you're doing well in the World Series, I haven't had a good World Series, but I've been getting really deep in all the events. So I've been playing until like midnight every night. And so then when are you going to work out? Because you have to come back in the next day at noon, particularly for someone who's playing every event. So I haven't been able to work out while I've been here, which has been really tough because, I think like Phil Hellmuth will finish a tournament and he'll go work out. But the problem for me is that like I have my kids here. So every minute that I can spend with them where I'm not stuck down at the Rio is, I feel like that for the 6 weeks I can give up working out in order to make sure that I'm maximizing my time with them because it's such a busy time for me in terms of how much I'm able to see them.
So, do you bring your children to most events when you're playing?
No, only when it's going to be a really long period of time. I mean, most events it's like you go and, the chances are you're going to be knocked out in the first couple days because that's just mathematically true. And so, it's 3 days away from them. Here it's like I'd be 6 weeks away from them, and I'm not willing to do that for anything. It's like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it's like rock stars traveling. They want to bring their ladies out. That's understandable.
Yeah.
Now, on a family matter, obviously you've got a very well-known brother.
Yeah.
Say, for example, final table, main event, you end up heads up with him, and you lose to him. Would you find it difficult to like him after that?
Well, I think it would only be fair because I've knocked him out of like 4 or 5 tournaments or something, and I did win the Tournament of Champions by knocking him out, so I guess he's due. You know what? My brother and I, because we were playing in the biggest games for a long time, and it wasn't like it is now. There was a really small group of people who played those games, so we played against each other all the time, and we've never taken anything that happened at the table away from the table. But you just can't do that. It's like we're doing our job. It would be like if we were lawyers and he beat me in a case or something. It's just part of your job. Besides, frankly, if we were heads up in the World Series, it's like, what's the worst that happens? Like, he wins $10 million and I win, $6 million or something. She's like, oh, my God, woe is me. I better not talk to my brother anymore. That would be stupid.
So you always give the impression of being incredibly composed when you're playing.
Oh, okay.
I'd say you do. Do you ever find it difficult to keep your emotions in check?
Not really. I mean, actually, the other day I got really mad in the poker room because a dealer was being abused. That's really the only time that I get really upset.
What was happening?
Well, what happened was it was the Stud Ada Bear tournament. We're really late in the tournament. We're down to like 35. And so we're playing 2 and 4,000, and both players still have a lot of blacks in front of them, so they're betting like a large number of chips, right? So the player is in the 7th seat, and he's playing against a player in the 6th seat. And it's a split pot, and the dealer splits the middle pot, hands it to each player, and then the player pushes all the money back in and says, you split every chip. Which I thought, well, they're sitting right next to each other, so maybe he just thought the money got, So now a few hands later, he's in the 7th seat, the other player's now in the 4th seat. They're betting, $4,000 at a time in blacks. Split pot, the dealer splits the middle, hands it to the players, and the player reached over to the other guy's chips and his chips and threw them back at the dealer and said, you split every chip. So the dealer didn't really say anything. It was an excellent dealer, right? The dealer doesn't say anything. He starts to split them up again. He hands 2 stacks. He starts to go to stack the rest of the money that's been thrown at him. The player does it again and throws the chips at him and says, no, I want to see you do not hand a chip out until you split every chip. Now, the dealer hadn't done anything wrong. And these dealers at the World Series are they're working for like $12 an hour. And this was a good dealer. He didn't talk back to the player. He just sat there and sort of was taking the abuse. And he hadn't made a mistake to hold down. So I started yelling at the player, and I was like, you can't abuse this dealer like that. He starts screaming at me. I called the floor over. The floor came over. I start to try to explain to the floor what's happened. This player is now screaming at me, basically saying, like, she's just being a bitch because I can say whatever I want, and I can treat the dealer however I want. And I just looked at him. I was like, you be quiet, and you let me tell this floor man what's happening. And I told the floorman what had happened, and I basically just said, this dealer's done a great job. He hasn't made a mistake. He's working for $12 an hour, and he doesn't deserve to have someone touching someone else's chips and throwing chips in his face. And basically the floorman did the right thing, and he told the other player, if you touch another chip, 10-minute penalty. which I thought was really good. And that's really the only time that I lose my composure at the table is when I see a human being being like so incredibly mistreated just because they think it's like so a dealer's in the box and they just think that they're like a whipping board, like they're not a human being or something. And these dealers work so hard, you know, and they just don't deserve to be treated like that. So I started screaming. Everybody was like, "What's got Annie?" You know, like, because I was really like yelling at the top of my lungs by that point because I was so angry to see somebody treated that way.
Oh, fair enough though. Defender of the people.
Well, he didn't deserve the abuse. He was an excellent dealer. He really was.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Annie. And,
thank
I'll
you.
Let you get on and get a good night's sleep.
Well, I'm going to try because tomorrow, you know, cross my fingers, I'll make it to. I have to go to LA on Sunday and Monday, so I'm hoping that that's a problem, and I have to come right back for Tuesday.
Well, good luck and really go and win it, please.
All right, I'm going to try.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.